All right, welcome to another edition of Canine Conversations, the podcast that now can also be seen visually on YouTube and Facebook because I have received such great response to the video portion of this that I decided to make it a video podcast, and therefore you can see it on any of the podcast outlets you use, Apple or Google or any of the different places you get your podcast. Listen to it while you're driving, but you can also see me in all my glory here. Maybe not today because I'm wearing camouflage. I might be a little bit invisible, but we were just out doing some bird dog training, and I think this is the right garb for that. We're training Dwayne for his hunt test, which we'll see how that goes. But today we're going to talk about something really interesting, and that is defining healthy relationships with dogs, right? I just finished this week doing a long 2-day intensive training at Bound Angels University for shelter employees from across the country. We had a guy, Anthony, really great guy here from New York City, from Brooklyn. We had 2 kids here from Missouri. We had 2 ladies here from Ukaipa Animal, and we had it was a great group. It was a really great group. We had a lot of fun. We trained a lot of dogs and learned a lot. So that's always the fun part. But, you know, the one thing we always get down to is defining these healthy relationships. Like, you know, in shelters, I always tell volunteers or dog trainers or management not to get emotionally attached to the dog. So in other words, what I don't ever want people to do in a shelter environment is to, how do I say it? You know, to love the dog. I know you're going to end up loving the dog and get attached to the dog, but it's super unhealthy mainly for the dog, because what happens is this dog was a pet. The dog was loved. The dog was, you know, lived in a home, hopefully slept on a bed, you know, or in a bed or you know, on a carpeted floor or something. And then suddenly, bam, ripped away from them. They end up in a shelter, sleeping on a concrete floor behind iron bars, where they're completely freaked out. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea why this is happening, and then they go into this feral state, right? This state where they have to fight for survival, and because they're afraid, they don't know what's going on. They don't understand that someone might adopt them or they might get killed. So when that happens to dogs, they go into a feral state, and that feral state really starts to define the person or the dog that they are. The reason that's so serious is because we want to utilize the trust and balance in the dog's mind, or whatever's left, to get them out of the shelter. Now, when people form this bond with them, they start loving on them and hugging him and kissing him and treating him like they're their pet, then what happens is these dogs bond with that person. Now, if that person takes the dog home, I got no problem with it, right? And I'm going to talk about this issue with this Malinois after this. But basically, the dog then attaches themselves to another person that they have to detach from, or detach from. Detach, I don't think that's a word. To detach from in order to get into their next home. And I think all of this messes with the dog's mind, or messes with their ability to trust. So I try to advocate for not doing that. I think it's a really bad idea. I don't like it. What I really kind of advocate people to do is to be a coach for the dog, and to give the dog what the dog really needs, and you know, and give the dog a lot more balance as opposed to love. So balance, structure, training, and all that, I think is very healthy for the dog. Looking at it from the perspective of love, affection, and that, I think it's harder on the dog. Of course, we're going to love the dog, but the idea of that is harder for the dog to understand. It's more changes for the dog, so I kind of advocate not doing it. Great example of that is, I was asked, there was this Malinois at the shelter, I'm not mentioning which shelter, and they said the dog is really messed up, the dog is just crazy, the dog is this, is that. Not uncommon for a Malinois, especially in a shelter, because they start to spin out of control. They have no idea what's going on. They need a lot of stimulation, but the stimulation they receive in the shelter is something that will often break them down, right? It'll often confuse them and put them into a different state. This was exactly the case with this young female Mally. And she was, I don't know, maybe 6, 8, 10 months old, not much more than that. I got the dog out. The person who works in the shelter said to me, "Oh, she's really bonded to me," which is super unhealthy, right? It's super bad, because this person, this shelter employee, is not going to take this dog home. And because they're not going to take the dog home, this dog being so attached to her, the shelter worker, confuses the dog. So I'll give you a great example. I went up to the kennel door. I've got a pretty solid presence. I've got usually a pretty easy time getting dogs to come out to go with me. The dog saw me, looked at me, saw the kennel, saw the employee, the shelter employee, and immediately was super happy. When I went to go get the dog ran and hid in the back cubicle of the kennel and wouldn't come out. When the girl who works there went into the kennel, she came out and she was all over and nuzzling her, happy, 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 and it looks cute, right? So we all would say, oh, how sweet, how cute, the dog's bonded with somebody, but it's not, right? Because what happened is I took the dog down the hallway, out the back, and into the yard, and the dog would not connect with me at all. Now, granted, somebody's going to say, well, eventually the dog will bond with you, and that's true. The problem with that is that eventual picture doesn't make sense to a potential adopter, even a potential rescue. So this dog has wasted all this time bonding with this employee and hasn't really had the opportunity to understand that it should be kind of neutral to her. So I'm sure she's giving it affection, she's petting it and loving it and doing all this stuff, which is the greatest thing for the dog per se, but it's also very unhealthy for the dog because the dog can't bond. The dog can't get a solid picture of what the dog should be doing. So let's look at something, and that is how do we affect or enact healthy relationships with dogs? I'm going to break this down into three categories. First one being puppies, second one rescue dogs, three being adult dogs. When we get puppies hopefully come from a good breeder. They come from a rescue. They come from a shelter. But let's hope they're coming from, let's say, to start with, a good breeder. They're well reared. They're well bred. They're health checked. They're well socialized. And during the whelping process and the rearing process, when the dog is brought up, the dog must be exposed to many, many, many things, right? And in that, it's not that it should just be coddled and loved and hugged and kissed, because that's not healthy for the dog. That'll oftentimes build a dog with separation anxiety or too many connection issues to a person. So we want the puppy, the way it's raised is really, really critical. So one thing that ends up really giving us really terrible dogs is puppies that aren't raised with other puppies, right? Puppies that are, let's say, the only one that survives out of the litter. It doesn't learn any skills from other puppies, or, God forbid, puppies that are raised whose mom died. And I know people who have raised puppies like this. So there'll be a bottle foster, and they'll take these puppies and they'll raise them, they'll bottle feed them, and they'll do this. And inevitably, these people feel so bad for the dog that they protect him from everything. They treat him super softly and super timidly, and they're walking on eggshells around him. But when the puppy is raised by the mom is super harsh with the dog. She sometimes walks on it, she picks it up with her mouth, throws it on the other side of the whelping box, and all that. And the mom knows exactly what she can do to the dogs. I saw Maya raising a litter of puppies, and she was amazing. Right? She knew exactly how hard she could play with them, but knew not to go beyond that. Other puppies tend to play rough with the other puppies. That teaches the dog really this structure. It teaches the dog how to play. It teaches it bite inhibition. It teaches it boundaries and all that stuff, which is something that people aren't going to teach their puppies. So what they do is they baby talk the puppies, they coddle the puppies, they hug the puppies. Everybody has to hold the puppy, even if they don't know how to hold a puppy. Sometimes puppies fall down, and people get upset with puppies. They yell at puppies, or they over-baby puppies. So it's not one or the other, but it's the balance that we're really looking for, right? So we want real neutrality with puppies. We want them to see the world. We want them to explore. We want them to make mistakes. We want the puppy to fall down and get back up. Now, I'm not saying that strictly like I want the dog to fall off a table. I don't ever want that. But, the old Japanese adage, 7 times fall down, 8 times get up, means that I want the dog to learn to stumble, learn to recover, and learn to move forward and go on in its life. That's really critical. And oftentimes, people don't let puppies do that. So they also don't want to ever correct puppies. Now, if a puppy is sucking on the mom's nipple, looking for milk, and the puppy bites too hard, the mom will correct the puppy. If the puppy plays too rough with another puppy, the other puppy will correct the puppy. Or the mom will get between two feuding puppies and break it up. And all that makes for really healthy boundaries with puppies, because usually people Don't give the puppy freedom because they think it's cute. It's a puppy. Let the puppy be a puppy. Let the puppy do what it's going to do. And, when the puppy grows up, that's when we'll give the puppy corrections. And then it's too late. Because then it's a dog. Then we have a puppy, just like a child, that's gotten away with everything over weeks and weeks and months. And suddenly we're going to start correcting it, and that's not going to happen. So the dog is going to get frustrated. The dog is going to be resentful. And the dog is going to become obstinate and really start to resent you. Whereas if you just enacted some boundaries early on, it would be a much healthier relationship with the dog. So puppies need structure. They need solid interaction. They need to learn to stumble. They need to learn to, fall and get up, like I said, metaphorically, obviously. They need to learn boundaries. They need to learn what they can do and what they can't do, what we'll allow and what we won't allow. Like Goofy's trying to nuzzle me right now. No, Goofy, lie down. I'm working here. I'm trying to do a podcast. He's right here. Anyway, Goofy, go lie down. Go. So now let's talk about rescue dogs, something I've worked with extensively for years and have so many, issues when people do this incorrectly. So what inevitably happens, people rescue a dog and constantly remind the dog of the dog's past. He was abused, or I rescued him from a meat farm, or I rescued him from a shelter, or he was one day from being put down, or, they had the needle in his arm and I rescued him. All these great sob stories, which, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of grief for this, but the bottom line is forget that bull, right? Forget all that. Just make sure that when you rescue the dog, you have rescued this dog to give it a better life. And that life starts now, right? That life starts the minute you rescue the dog, not any other time. So don't remind the dog came from deplorable conditions. Don't remind the dog that the dog was abused. Don't remind the dog that the dog had nothing else. If the dog now has 3 legs, that it once had 4 legs, the dog doesn't care. The dog is living in the present right now. Right now, the dog is living in this moment, which you're not. You're thinking about the past, how terrible it was, and how good you want to make it in the future. And the dog doesn't care about that. The dog only cares about right now. Do I have a treat? Do I have a bowl of food? Do I have a ball to play with? And that's really it. So the other thing people do with rescue dogs, they always will say the dog was abused, right? The dog, my dog is afraid of a broom. I guarantee you he was beaten with a broom. My dog doesn't like men. He was kicked by men. My dog doesn't like children. Children poked him in the eye. Now, if you know that's true, that's one thing. And I give you some credit and I'll say, okay, that's a really good thing to know. Don't remind the dog of it. But if you don't know it, don't assume it, right? Don't make it worse for the dog. If the dog is afraid of a broom, introduce him to a broom. I got Goofy at 9 weeks old. He was scared to death of flags and balloons. So what I did, I introduced him to flags and balloons, a video on YouTube that shows exactly what I did, and it made it really easy for him because I introduced it to him around his food. He couldn't eat unless he was going to get around a balloon. Within a period of, I think it was 10 days or maybe 2 weeks, Goofy was in the yard popping balloons and jumping all over him. I had no issues with him ever again. So, the other thing, people always rescue dogs from the worst story. And I'm going to do another podcast on this because it's something that really upsets me. I hear all the time, we got the dog from the Korean meat market. We got the dog from a Chinese meat farm. And, we're killing thousands of dogs in this country every year. Thousands of dogs in this country. The thousands of dollars you, and I'm not saying you, but people spend to rescue a dog from Korea or China or wherever they eat dogs, those thousands of dollars could save many dogs in this country. And I'm going to talk about that later. I'm going to stop right there on that topic. But when you go into the story of the dog, the rescue dog, how you're going to relate with that dog should be neutral. It should be as if the dog just showed up in your life and you know nothing about the dog, which you usually don't, and you're going to give the dog a fair shot at a normal life. And the only way you're going to do that is to not remind the dog of their past. Give the dog structure, give the dog training, have expectations for the dogs, have boundaries for the dogs, because that's going to give the dog the best chance at adapting. You want the dog to become normal. Just like with a puppy, if you have a puppy and you treat it like a puppy always, then it's always going to remain a puppy. It's always going to have that immaturity to it because you're not expecting or giving the dog the ability to live up to becoming a dog. Just like with children. I see these guys coaching kids soccer in the park up here in Malibu, and they're playing all these games. Oh my God, that was the greatest goal of all times. It wasn't. It wasn't the greatest goal of all times. Pele or these great, these great athletes, they score the greatest goal of all times. A 3-year-old is not scoring the greatest goal of all times. And I think, and I'm coming from a place where I taught karate to kids for years. If you make these little achievements monumental achievements for a child, they don't ever have to go further. Now, I believe in rewarding it, believe in praising and being very, very generous with praise, but don't lie. Don't make it greater than it was. And that's what people do with the dogs. They over-coddle them. They over-coddle the puppy. They over-puppy the puppy. And the puppy stays stuck in that realm or in that age bracket because, at what point do you correct the puppy? In other words, if you don't correct the puppy when the puppy is 2 months old or 3 months old or 4 months old, then 6 months old, then 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, it's a year, 18 months, it's a mature dog by the time it hits 24 to 36 months, and you haven't given it the structure. So the structure is something that we want to layer in, but we want to make sure it's present from day one, right? New sheriff in town, I always tell this to people with adult dogs, which I'm going to go into next, that when you have a dog, the first day that dog is with you, the dog is a blank slate. The dog doesn't know what to expect. The dog has no clue on what you're going to do to it, for it, or with it. So if you're going to be an abusive person, hit the dog, kick the dog, punch the dog, abuse the dog, or if you're going to love the dog, hug the dog, kiss the dog, and coddle the dog doesn't know. The dog is starting from a neutral place. So obviously, you don't want to do either of the two that I just mentioned, but you want to come in the middle. There are expectations. There's, I expect my dog to behave. I expect my dog to respect me. I expect my dog to respect the environment, the house, wherever we are. And the dog must listen. I will teach the dog what I want the dog to do, but the dog must listen. And if the dog doesn't listen, well, then, the dog is going to have some consequences to deal with because a dog that doesn't listen is not a good dog. It's a very hard dog to live with. It's a very hard dog to keep safe because we want the dog to listen because we want to keep the dog safe, right? Those are critical things. Adult dogs. So sometimes, you're going to get a new dog because, whatever, your dog died or, somebody gave you a dog, they couldn't keep it or whatever that reason is. What do you know about the dog? That's the key thing. What was the dog's past life like? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because here you actually have a chance. If somebody gives you a dog, a friend or something like that, you kind of know what the dog did. Is the dog dominant? Is the dog good with cats, kids, bicycles, birds, whatever it is? If you know that, then utilize it. But still, give the dog structure. If the dog had no structure and is coming into your home, you've got that shot. The longer you let the dog go on without structure, without obedience, without expectations, the longer you're letting this dog fail. And more importantly, the longer you're letting this dog get away with a behavior that's not healthy and it's not something you want. So I try to get into that right away. Day one, when I got Maya, she was, I think, 4 years old or something like that. And she's going to turn 9 here soon. But day one, it was structure. These are my expectations. This is what I expect of you. This is what I will do. And I will not tolerate anything else. And based on that, Maya became a great dog. When I first got her, I couldn't get her around other dogs. She was gnarly. She would pull on a leash. She had horrible manners. But she was a beautiful dog. So that's why the people who, my clients bred her. And then said, well, she's a hard dog to keep. Would you like her? And I got her after training her for a while. But anyway, the biggest thing I think people get into with a dog in the early phases of owning that dog is affection. And affection is really something that's kind of confusing to dogs because we give this affection freely. Dogs earn affection. They earn praise. They earn respect. We just kind of dole it out because we think the dog is cute. Dogs don't look at you and think you're handsome or cute, unless they're looking at me, and start to give you affection, right? Dogs will really give affection based on what you've given them. So if you give a dog some really good food, the dog will be affectionate to you. It's appreciative, and it's going from that perspective. A dog will give you affection if it's in a cuddly phase, if it's bonding, if it's doing all these things. But a dog doesn't just do it willy-nilly. And if you do it willy-nilly, if you just give it to the dog, you're kind of setting the dog up for expectations that confuse the dog. I'm super affectionate with my dogs. I'm going to go on record here. My dogs sleep in bed with me. Janet and I sleep with our dogs. We always love having one of the dogs in the bed with us. It's fun. We have a joke in the morning. Boom, Goofy and Maya pop up. Jimmy has probably been sleeping there all night, and we love it, right? We think it's great. I hug my dogs. I kiss my dogs. I love, love, love. My dogs are my life. So when I tell you to be careful with affection, I'm telling you that because I want you to give your dog love. I want you to give your dog affection, but I want you to give it to the dog in a way that he'll understand and with healthy parameters around it. My dogs will get a correction. My dogs will do what I ask them to do. They will learn to do what makes me happy, because what makes me happy is important to them, because that's the relationship of the dog, right? The dog understands that rank and file. People always tell you, oh, dogs don't blah, blah, blah. I see so many people, other trainers, picking my stuff up and then going on their page and criticizing it. But, if they criticize it here, they know they're going to get corrected because they're wrong. So, and people say, oh, dogs, everything a dog does doesn't have a reason. It does, though. Everything we do has a reason. Everything I do has a reason. And there is a natural reason to life, that things ebb and flow very beautifully, but there's still rationale and reason behind them. So I always look at with adult dogs, do they love me or do they respect me, right? And in the dog kingdom, respect comes first, and then comes love. They need to respect you because they need to feel safe. They have a drive in their minds where they need to know that they're safe. And if they're safe, they love you. And that love is an unconditional love. It's the best love. I mean, it's just super powerful, but you must have it within structure. If not, the dog will love you and bite other people around you, or bite other dogs that come near you, and become, start resource guarding and stuff like that. Healthy decisions about bringing your new dog home is going to be the single best thing you can do for a dog, because you're going to give them the tools to thrive, the tools to survive, the tools to make you happy, and the tools to live a very balanced life. So when I'm saying all this stuff, I'm not saying it because I don't want you to give affection to your dogs. I'm giving it to you because I want you to give affection to your dogs, and I want you to benefit from that affection. But more importantly, I want the dogs to benefit. If a dog doesn't benefit from the life they have with you, then the dog is failing. The dog ends up in a shelter. The dog ends up killed. I'm in the shelters. I see it. It breaks my heart every single time I'm there. I mean, Janet says, how do you do this? How do you even stand to see these dogs in the shelters? And the answer to that is, I do it, because if I don't do it, they're not getting out. They're not getting a fair shake at things. There's nobody really doing this as much as with what I do. And I love doing it. I love helping these dogs and giving them a shot. So that's about it for healthy relationship with dogs. I know I talk about this all the time. I'll do some more podcasts about it in the future, but let's get to some questions and answers. Here's one. Jane Haven says, hey there, I'm looking for some advice on how to deal with resource guarding between my two dogs. They're both rescues. I adopted earlier this year separately a 4-year-old female rescue greyhound and a 7-year-old Great Dane cross Neapolitan Mastiff. The problem I'm having is at dinner time, after they're both finished eating, the greyhound tends to sniff around the Dane's mixed bowl after he's done, or at the table where I prepare their food, and he has attacked her a few times now when she's doing this, completely randomly over the months. I've been there to step in, break it up, and no one is ever hurt, but the fact it happens completely randomly has me stumped. I've tried feeding them separately, but the issue is the smell of the area post-feeding, and sometimes he doesn't care about her doing it at all. I should also mention that while the greyhound is usually very wary around the Dane mix for a few days after the fights, he has no problems licking her face and acting normally 5 minutes later. These are the same dogs that swap bones and chase each other around the yard. Any insight would be much appreciated. So first of all, you've got two dogs earlier this year together, like not the same day, but you got them separately, but together, too much time, and you haven't imposed structure on the dog. So the dogs this will get worse, by the way. You're saying that they're swapping bones and running around when the resource isn't that great and when you're not there. So I have a feeling this has something to do with your structure with the dogs, how the dogs see you, because it's happening around you. You're there to break it up. What I would really do is I would impose an immense sense of structure on it. And what I would do is you can feed them in the same place. I hope you're big enough to break up a Great Dane mix and what's the other one? A greyhound. I mean, those are big dogs. I hope you're a very, very powerful woman in order to break this up, because, and trust me, I've known a lot of women who can do a lot better job in breaking up dog fights than men. You need to be able to control the dog. So what I would do to make this really simple is I would find the dog that is the fairest dog, which is obviously the female, because the male is kind of jumping on and doing these things. I would feed the female first. I'd have the boy in a sit. Then I would feed the boy, and I would really, mealtime would be so structured for me with these dogs so that this wouldn't happen again. And I would do this for minimum of 30 days. I would go down, I would hunker down, I would have these dogs sitting, waiting, eating. Next one eats. Then when the first one is done, the first one lays down, and just teach them structure. Structure will solve this. Other than that, you ain't going to solve it. Next one goes out to Newer Shark 05. I've always been curious about this. If you come face to face with a highly aggressive large dog who's going to chase and attack you, what is the proper action to take? That's a good question. The key thing is, first of all, if a dog is chasing you, if you're standing still, that it will not trigger the dog's prey drive as much as if you're moving. So the more you move, the more you run away, the better shot the dog has of getting more frustrated and the attack becoming much more aggressive. I probably would suggest trying to stand still. I've had plenty of dogs lunge at me, and if I stand still, they suddenly just stop. Or even if I take a step in towards them, it startles them. That being said, if a dog I knew was going to attack me, I would strike out, and I would try to startle the dog. I've seen people do this before. Janet did it with an Akita that was attacking Dwayne. She got in, and Janet's not a large woman, but she was very powerful with her energy, got into the face of this dog, and the dog just kind of startled for that second. And that's all you're going to really get. You're going to get that 1 second startle time, and hopefully you can do something. Hopefully you can get a stick or a rock and protect yourself when this dog does this. Standing still, not triggering the dog's prey drive. The more you run, the faster you run, the more the dog gets frustrated. Unless you're, Carl Lewis or Edwin Moses, then you're not going to get away from these dogs. Next one goes out to Le Blog du Coaching. Hello, how do you prevent your dog from jumping? I have a big German Shepherd. If I put a toy like you, he just jumps on me. Please tell me how to do it correctly. Well, your dog needs to respect you. The dog needs to understand, and this is the same thing that I've seen with Janet and Dwayne. He is much more engaging to Janet to play because it's a more fun game, and he's going to try to push it and dominate it and win the game. Where with me, he knows I control the game. And that makes it actually a lot more fun for the dog in other ways, but you've got to make sure that you can control the dog. Don't bring toys out until you know you have solid structure. Don't bring the drive of the dog up until you know you can control the drive of the dog at all those different levels. So go slow, find something that's a little less valuable to him, keep him on a line, correct him when he does it, step into him, make sure the dog understands that you're in control. Next one, Mr. 13 King, I think that's what it is. What do you do when the dog cries and howls if you leave the house and leave her in a crate? This is my problem with 6-month-old Frenchie. She sleeps in her crate at night with no accidents, and she knows the command crate, but does not like when we leave the house. So first of all, it's not as much a crate issue as it is a separation issue. The dog doesn't like you being away. What you're going to want to do with a dog like this is you're going to want to disappear into different rooms of the house while the dog is there and not leave, right? So the dog needs to see a difference of pattern. Like if every time he sees that you put him in the crate, you close the door, you walk out, and you're gone for a long period of time, you're going to set the dog up to fail. So put the dog inside, and when you do leave the dog with something exciting. Leave the dog with something that he does not get when you're there, like a big Kong filled with his favorite treats, or a big marrow bone, or something like that. Something to keep the dog very, very busy. Put some music or TV on, and so the dog has some kind of something to keep it company, and that should really help that. Okay, the next one goes out to Wild and Tree Dog Training. Hi, Robert. Thanks for providing such clear information. I love sharing your videos with my training clients. Thank you for doing that. I am reaching out because I have a client with a 1-year-old high-drive German Shepherd that has not been receiving adequate training and exercise to meet his mental and physical needs. I provide private at-home sessions with him, and the dog has become increasingly excited by my visits. As I suspect, these make up the majority of his mental outlet time. This makes it challenging to demonstrate introductory training techniques that the owner can utilize at home to address this deficit of mental stimulation. Do you have any recommendations for ways to manage this or suggestions for training exercise that would help him learn to settle during our sessions? Well, Dogs will often get super excited when you get there because you know better how to play with the dog and how to read the dog than the owners. And you're the new factor. You're the fun guy. When you come, the dog gets to play and the dog gets to do all those things. So that's really normal. I've seen that with my clients, over the years. And, I don't really think there's any way to combat that. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to do less with the dog and have the owners do more. So I would with dogs like that, I do a real quick demonstration. This is what I want you to do. Boom, I hand it over to the owner. I let the owner be the bringer of more excitement into the game than me during those sessions, because it's just the fact that I'm so charming, I'm so much fun, the dog is just going to love being with me more than with the owner. And that ends up being really hard on the owners, and the owners take it personally, and then the dog refuses to play with the owners. And those are the times when I just cross my arm, turn away, and just don't pay any attention to the dogs. It makes it easier for the dog to understand. Have the owner be more involved. Have the owner do a majority of the training, demonstrate a little bit. It's our habit as dog trainers to try to really show off the potential of the dog and do all that stuff. And a lot of times it's not really that beneficial for the dog. So good, keep up the good work, though. I think it's going to be really important for that person to understand that. Goofy, I got one more question. Goofy's nuzzling under my arm right here. Severia Jones says, Mr. Cabral, I'm a bit confused. In some videos, you throw the treat so the pup will have to back away from you for the treat, and other times the treat is given right in front of you. I am confused as to when to give treat up close as opposed to slight toss behind the puppy. I've addressed this several times. I'm going to address it one more time for you. Just like you're confused, I want the dog to be confused. I don't want the dog always predicting that the treat is coming from my hand. If the dog always predicts that, then the dog becomes contingent on it and will always break coming forward. If the dog thinks sometimes the treat's going behind him, sometimes it's going in front of him, sometimes it's going left, the dog will wait to see where the release is and then release. The reason you're doing that is to teach the dog to be patient on the release and to let the release fall where it will and then break. Don't become predictive with your dog. Dogs are very smart. They follow patterns and they get that. So that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Please, check podcasts on iTunes, on Google Play, on all the other outlets where podcasts are. That's where you can find this Canine Conversations podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Lots of great stuff there. Join my membership section on my website, robertcabral.com. Lots of great information there, updated 2 times weekly. If you want to get a question answered quickly, that's the place to go. I do online consults with people there. Only members can get those things. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving your dog the best life possible. And I will see you next week. Take care.